My team and I have poured our blood, sweat, and tears into this preset pack. It took over 200 hours to perfect these 3 presets, so you can have the best.
What are you watching? Just watching this creator go on about how he went through hell to create these 5 new presets that he's now selling for 70 bucks. Oh, I hate that. Dude, they make promises like, oh, with 1 click, just add these presets and you'll be famous on Instagram. You'll have the best looking It doesn't work like that. Presets should be free. Hey! Well, you know what you just, yeah. I realized what I just did. I gave myself a bunch more work and I will get started on those free presets. I mean, you're doing it for the people, right? Yeah. You might gain like 5 subscribers maybe.
All right, ladies and gents, I've made some summer warm presets for you guys. Again, completely free. The link is in the description. Go download them, test them out. What we're gonna do in this video is I'm gonna show you guys all the presets and give you a little rundown of what each one is about. I'm gonna explain to you like a few tips on how to use them properly, because I know your frustration if you've ever had presets before from a creator. They don't look good on your photos, or they look different than what they were showing. So I'm gonna show you a couple tricks that you can do and what really makes the most of a preset. And then finally, I'm gonna walk you through how I made a couple so that you guys can take that information and run with it. Maybe you design your own warm presets. Maybe you take mine and you build off of them and change them and save them as your own. So let's get started with that. Let's jump in and I'll show you guys what the presets are like. The free presets. All right, the first preset is subtle warmth. And just like the name, it's very subtle. Desaturates the blues a little bit, adds a very soft pinkish orange to your photos. It gives you kind of like a dreamy summer vibe. It lowers that contrast. It's a very soft and very minimal edit. And then again, you take it and run with it as much or as little as you please. The next one is retro warmth. This one gives you that film feel, that just enough grain to give you that old school vibe. I don't know, it's a film look. It looks great for summer photos. Then we got intense warmth, and this one is just like a punch you in the face, warm tones in the shadows and highlights. It's gonna bring all of your colors more to the warm side, more orange, more yellow, take away those blues, and it's gonna really give you that hot sun feel. Next up, contrast warmth. While we're still adding a little bit of orange, it's a muted orange, and like the name suggests, we're jacking up that contrast, making those shadows dark, making those lights light. It's gonna give you a really punchy look. All right, and then lastly, we've got Cinematic 1 and 2. Cinematic 1 gives you that movie feel. It's got the warm shadows, warm tones, but it's like a very subtle orange and teal. Cinematic 2 is the same skeleton, but I've sort of adjusted the shadows to be a little bit more green. You'll see that in some summer blockbuster films where the shadows are green. This works better on lighter photos, so that green shadow isn't as noticeable, but it also really nicely plays with your blues. Again, guys, all the presets, they're free. If you want to follow along and build your own, that's great. But pause the video right now, go download the presets for free. I mean, you can donate if you want. That's just a beauty move if you like my content. But I'm willing to give them to you for free because I know not everyone can afford to pay $70, $80 for 5 or 6 presets from their favorite creators. So I got your back. So now that I've gone through my presets and hopefully you've downloaded my free presets by now, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about using them and implementing them, because one thing I find when I'm downloading presets or trying creators' presets is what they show you on their site, they've definitely tweaked because it doesn't always look good on your photos. When I create these presets, I very rarely touch the basic adjustments because that's very photo dependent. Some people like to shoot darker like myself, some people like to shoot lighter, more overexposed, and the end result is gonna vary. So if I'm messing with those sliders without taking into account your shooting style, then all of a sudden I might be jacking up the exposure on an already overexposed picture, and then you look at it and go, ugh, that's terrible. That part of the adjustment is up to you guys. I'm giving you that base color and then you tweak it as you see fit. The only preset in this pack that I did mess with the basic adjustments with is the retro one. But the reason I did that is because I lowered the highlights, raised up the shadows, just to flatten out the image a bit. A lot of film and retro photos, if you notice, aren't very high contrast. So again, I sort of laid the groundwork for that, but you can always adjust as you see fit. And on the note of all presets not working perfectly as soon as you upload them, the same thing happens for mine. So they might work really well on some photos and then you try them on others and they don't look as well. It might need just a little bit of tweaking. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we've got this photo right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and apply the intense warmth. Okay, so look at that right away. The picture goes from very blue to very, very warm and orange. However, if you notice, once I've applied that preset, anywhere that she's kind of a little bit sunburned, the reds really get jacked up. So we wanna go down and make the necessary adjustments. We're getting too much red, so we're gonna go to the saturation, lower the reds a little bit, and then raise the luminance of the reds. I kinda like where that is, but you could still see it's a little bit red, so I'm gonna go over to the hue and move the red a little bit to the orange side. So now that we've done that, you can actually see that the red has gone from like a very tomato red to almost like a bronzy tan. Again, it's not necessarily the preset's fault. You have to take the preset and then run with it. It's not a one-click solution every single time. Sometimes it is, and that's usually great, but adjustments. All right, take a look at this picture. Without any adjustments, it's a lot brighter than the last picture. So adding, let's say, the retro feel, it still looks pretty good, but for me, I wanna take that down, and if you bring just the exposure down, you get a whole different look. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. It's up to you guys, but what I'm saying is I don't play with the basic adjustments so that you can. By lowering that exposure, I got a photo that I'm a lot happier with. So again, take the free presets and run with them. Alrighty, let's take this photo of Caroline on the beach, and what we're gonna do is reverse engineer how I did the retro feel. So the first things we played with here are the highlights and shadows. Again, brought the highlights down, and then brought the highlights down to about -60. Brought the shadows up just about the same amount, and you can already see that that flattens out the image quite a bit. You're getting a lot more detail in her hair. It helps give you that retro feel. Next, we're gonna move down to the tone curve. We're gonna go to our whites. So what I do is the whites at the top, the highlights, are gonna be coming down just a little bit. Then somewhere around just above the middle, you're gonna bring that up and expose that a little bit higher. Get down into the mids, the lower mid-tones, and then just drag that slightly below that middle line. And here's what really helps with that retro look. In the dark shadows, you're gonna bring that down, but then you're gonna grab your blacks and jack those up a bit. So if you see with and without, again, we've again flattened out that image. We're gonna go over to our blues. Something that's gonna help warm this photo up is we're gonna drag our highlights and our whites down into the yellows. So we want that more yellowy highlight. We're gonna level it off a bit by bringing our mid-tones, our higher mid-tones, closer to the center line. Bring our shadows down a little bit more into the yellow, and then again, bring our blacks up so they're just a little bit blue. We're sort of creating that S curve that you know, but doing that with the yellow and blue tones in our photo. Next up, we're gonna get into the HSL panel. Let's start with our hues. So our reds are gonna be jacked up just a little bit to about +6, +7. Our oranges and yellows as well. Again, we're shifting those over a little bit. When you see it now and when I'm doing it, it's very subtle, but at the end of the day, you turn on your HSL and you can really see a difference from what you started. So again, we're gonna bring our greens a little bit over to the turquoise, and then our blues are gonna come over, or sorry, our aquas are gonna come a little bit more to the green side, let's say around -15. Our blues, the same, they're gonna go more to the teal side, and you can see that really changes the sky. The retro works really nicely when you have blue skies in the photo and like the contrast of the sand. Our purples, we're gonna bring those down more to the blue. Same with any magenta, it's gonna go more to the pink side than the red. And that should do it for the hues. Let's get into saturation. Our reds are gonna come down a little bit. Same with our oranges and yellows. You can see the numbers on the screen. Pause it if you wanna reference it, you know. I mean, if you download the free presets, you won't have to reference any of it. It'll already be there, and then you can just tweak it from there. All right, back to it. We're gonna lower the saturation on those greens way down. Same with aqua and blue. We wanna be like in the high -30s here. Purple and magenta down as well. We don't want a lot of those in our retro photo. Luminance doesn't really change. We'll bring the reds down, we'll darken them a bit, darken the yellows a tiny bit, again, very subtly. Same with the blues and same with the purples. It's not much. You're hovering in and around like -5 to -15. Nothing really much more than that unless you want to tweak it later on. And you go up and you can see there's a bit of a subtle difference. And then we're gonna get into color grading. Our midtones, let's start with our midtones. We're gonna drag them over to the orangish section. And again, just pull that center line just a tiny bit off, almost just so the center dot is outside of that ring. Keep it in the orange sort of spectrum here, yellowy oranges, perfect. And then Our shadows are gonna be more to the purpley blue side. This one you're gonna pull just outside the ring, not too far, because then you get wacky colors and it doesn't make sense. And then our highlights, we're gonna go back to orange and just very subtly move it like the edge of the ring is touching that center point. So if we turn those on and off, we see we've created a little bit more warmth in it. Beautiful. And here's where we get into that retro. This is what really just pushes it over the edge and gives it that retro film feel, the details panel. We're gonna add a little bit of sharpening. We're gonna throw that up about halfway. Radius and details will stay where they are by default. Masking will stay where it is by default. Luminance, detail, contrast, you don't have to touch. Noise reduction, color, we're gonna bring that up a little bit. Leave the detail where it is and leave the smoothness where it is as well. The last thing to do, the cherry on top of the cake, you're gonna add that film grain, because what makes it look like film more than film grain? So we're gonna jack that film grain up to about 40, the size also around 40, and then the roughness around 55 to 60. Now you can see it in your photo, but again, this is something you want to play with. Maybe you want the size of your grain bigger or smaller, you want more or less. Get to that perfect endpoint for where you want the photo to be. This is how the retro warmth was built. Now, what I encourage you guys to do and what I normally do is I'm gonna go back up to the basic adjustments panel and I'm gonna take a look at this exposure. I like the vibe. You can tell it's a retro looking photo. But then for me, if you just bring this down a bit, it's amazing. I love that. Let's move on to the next one. Let me show you how I built the intense warmth preset. We're gonna start off with this picture of Caroline hiding in the trees like a little monkey. You can see that her skin is sort of pinkish. The tree is very white. There's a lot of cooler blue tones in the photo just because it was taken in the shade. Watch what the intense preset does to this photo. Just by hovering over it, you can see it makes it a lot warmer and it really solidifies that summer feel. Without it, it's cool. It seems like a colder photo. Throwing that intense warmth just locks it in. So let's reverse engineer this baby. Okay, first thing we're gonna do, again, skip the basic adjustments right off the bat. We're gonna come back to it at the end to just put those final touches on it. We're gonna go down to our tone curve, and in the blues, I always like to just bring those highlights down to a yellow, not too much, and then I'm gonna take the midtones and drag those into the yellow as well. Just a little bit of like a bow curve upwards. We're not gonna touch the blacks, that's fine. We're gonna go over to the white in the tone curve, and we're gonna make sort of like a reverse S curve. We're gonna bring our highlights up a bit, get down into the midtones, bring those up a bit. Then in the shadows, we're gonna drop those shadows just slightly below that center line. Unlike the retro set, we're gonna darken those blacks. We want that punchy contrast. All right, after the tone curve, let's move on to the HSL, starting with hue. Now in this one, color is a lot more prominent, so the sliders, as compared to the retro, are gonna be moved a little bit more. So our hue, again, this is very preferential, but here's what I did. The red's a little bit more towards the orange, about +8, +9. I left orange and yellow alone. Greens, I put them a little bit more towards the teals. The aquas, I put a little bit more towards the blues. That's probably around 30. Gonna bring those greens up a bit more to around 18, 19. Blues, we're gonna send towards the aqua, and we'll do that around -20. Purple, we're gonna send that over to magenta at about +30, and then magenta towards the red about +15. So let's just turn that on and off, and you can see saturation. Here's where you're gonna start seeing a difference. Saturation, reds are going up, oranges are going down to about -10, -8. Yellow, we're gonna bring up to about 14, 15. Greens are gonna come down to about -40, let's say. Aquas are gonna come up a little bit just so you can see them in the background. Our blues, we're gonna bring down to -14. Same thing with our purples. Those are going right down to -45, and the magentas down to -30 as well. We're pulling those purples out. We want more of that yellowy, orangey warmth and not so much a purpley warmth. All right, now the luminance. We're gonna take our reds down to about -20, oranges down to about -30. Yellows, you're gonna go all the way down to -40. Greens are gonna come down as well because I feel like the greens are distracting from the warmth. Aqua we can leave alone. Blue, we're gonna bring that luminance up. Magenta, -10, and then the pinks we're gonna bring down to like -25 as well. Now color grading is definitely gonna make a big difference here. We're gonna bring this just a little bit outside of that dot. We're gonna warm it up. If you turn that on and off, you can see the wood and her skin has become more yellowy and warm. We're gonna do the same thing with the highlights because we're trying to warm this baby up. So highlights are gonna come basically the same position as the midtones were. You want that orangey yellow, and then you wanna pull that center ring just outside that center dot. So let's see. Yeah, it's coming alive. And then to really drive home the warmth on this one, Also, the shadows are gonna come into the oranges, and you're gonna pull that just outside that center dot. So now, once we've pulled all of these outside, you can see by turning it on and off how much more it's gone from a blue photo to a yellow photo. All right, and the last thing we have to do is go back to our basic adjustments and then just play with this to be how we want it. So the highlights for me on this piece of wood are a little bit distracting, so I'm gonna bring the whites and the highlights down. However, this has caused her face to be a little bit darker, so I'm gonna bring the shadows up. And what you can do as well is, I won't do it because it's time consuming, but you can actually mask out your subject and paint away certain areas that you don't want to change. So for example, I could darken this whole photo and then just lighten the shadow across her face so that all the attention goes to her. One thing I will do is I'll put a mask in there, a linear gradient mask. I'm gonna drag it over this log and then just cover the majority of the log here. And then I'm gonna lower the exposure on this log, lower the highlights, and lower the whites. So there's still information retained in the log, but now it's not as distracting. You can see it's a lot brighter than before, and then we've darkened it so that the focus goes to Caroline's face. And there you have it. That's how I built out the Intense preset. Again, guys, all of these presets are available for free on my site. I will put the link right here, but it's also in the description. All I ask in return is that you subscribe, because that means a lot to me. You know, it takes time to make these videos, it takes time to make these presets. Not like 400 hours like some of these creators claim, but it does take time, and you know, I always appreciate you guys. I always appreciate fans and people supporting, so hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video, because you know I'm gonna make more presets in the future, and they're gonna be free. Love ya.